Alright, what's going on everybody? Happy Sunday. So I felt compelled to make this video today. The Lord put this in my heart to speak to you about. He put this on my heart. And I felt, it needed to be said. Because, in the wake of the discussion and the debate of Red Dead Redemption 2 and the movement and the aiming, one of the defenses that is being used to what I believe is damage control, for Red Dead's poor responsiveness, controls, aiming, and movement is it's realistic. And this is an excuse that has been used for, several other games. This obviously isn't the first time. But I think in Red Dead Redemption's 2 case is the most I've ever seen it used recently. And it's come to the point where but it's realistic is the new but it's portable. And I literally just said that on Twitter. You know, with the Nintendo fans, when they were getting poor ports for games, games that old games that came out like 5 years ago, that run at sub 720p, ran at sub 30 frames, and they were being charged a full $60 for it as if it was a new game. What's the excuse every time? But it's portable. Now, when it comes to games that fail at having, fundamental and basic gameplay mechanics that work well, the go-to defense now is, but it's realistic. That's like the rule of thumb now to defend certain games. When all else fails, say, but it's realistic. One of the worst things about this defense is in the situations where people use it to defend an aspect of a game, most of the time, the aspect of the game they're defending is actually not realistic at all. That's what I think frustrates me the most about this one is, okay, people say it's realistic or it's based in realism. So I usually try to take that aspect of the game they're talking about and bring it to real life. And then I realize this doesn't happen in real life. This is not how things work in real life. This is not how people or objects perform or behave in real life. So how is it realistic when this is not actually what happens? You see, there is a certain conflict and clash when you try to put too much what is interpreted as realism in an unrealistic setting. It becomes problematic, right? So it's people's interpretation of realism, which I believe actually isn't in the first place, but let's just go with the argument that it is realistic, which like I said, a lot of the times it actually isn't. People are just saying that as an excuse, and they're misconstruing realism with poor attempts at realism, right? So let's just say it actually is realistic. We're playing video games. If realism does not benefit a game, then what is the point? If that realism or attempt at realism does not make a favorable, advantageous, or a rewarding gaming experience overall, if it's not conducive to that, then what's the point? The way some of you speak, I think some of you would rather have a realistic game that mechanically plays like trash than an unrealistic game that is mechanically sound and stable and beneficial to the player. Let me tell you two things that gamers often overhype that do not inherently make a game better: originality and realism. Originality I've spoke about in the past. Gamers hype originality all the time, but something being original does not make it good. Something can be original and absolutely garbage. An original idea does not mean a good idea. An original concept, theme, story for a game does not make it good. Just because no one's ever thought of it before, no one's ever done this before, doesn't mean it's going to be good. Okay? And gamers do the same thing with this concept of realism. Just because it mimics or tries to closely relate to realism does not make it inherently good or better. Originality and innovation is cool, but if you ask me, what I want in a game is not necessarily originality and innovation all the time. Not all the time. Sometimes, you know what the best games are? The best games are the games that steal all the good concepts, all the good ideas, and all the good gameplay from other great games. The best games are usually not original. Sorry to break it to you. The best games are usually not the most realistic. Sorry to break it to you. Video games themselves are naturally unrealistic experiences with some realistic characteristics. But the problem comes is when there is an uneven balance of certain dimensions being realistic and others being unrealistic. If that balance isn't just right, it leads to a poor experience overall for the gamer. So my simple point to summarize is you can have realism in your game. Fine, cool, that's all fine and dandy. I'm not against that. But when the attempt at realism begins to hinder the gameplay, then that's counterproductive and you're hustling backwards. You're taking away from the ultimate point of what video games are. If you're put in a world and the scope of that world is unrealistic, but you yourself are burdened by realism, then that creates a very challenging experience and unpleasant experience. I like my challenges to come from the opposition and the enemies in games, but I do not like when my greatest, most challenging enemy in a game is my own character itself because of the parameters a developer has set